Hi, everyone. This is Matt Schafman from UX and AZ, and we have Rachel Malak with us to go over design systems and design tokens. She's from Neudesic, she's senior designer at Neudesic, and take it away. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. Like Matt said, I'm Rachel Malak. And I'm going to be talking about design systems and design tokens today. So hope you're up for it. Okay. So this is just a little bit about me. I've been at Neudesic for about 6 years. I have a degree in applied internet technologies from Liberty University. And really all that is just web design and some networking and web development kind of all rolled into one. I was hired actually as a developer and transitioned over to UX. And I've continued building both my UX and dev skills ever since. And my top 3 professional focuses, you can see those there, a lot of design system-based stuff. All right. Before we get too far along, I was asked if we could do like a screenshot so we can post to social media. So if you want to share your screen, we can get a cool grid going and Matt can take a screenshot. Probably could have done this before the recording, but oh well.
It's a good idea. Now I just got to figure out how to get them all in a grid.
Ask me to. Yeah,
Here, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? You'll have to stop sharing your screen so it brings them all into a thing.
Yeah.
There it is. That'll work.
There we go.
All right. So let's see everybody. Yeah.
I don't have a webcam, so.
You don't have a webcam?
You're not.
What?
I don't. I never bought one. I had to retire my laptop, and now I
give me your address. I'll send you one. Give me your address. I'll send you one over there.
Used right behind me.
Yeah, I probably have a ton of these things laying around. I cleaned up the other day. All right. All right, let me do this. So I am going to say 1, 2. Whoops, let me get Danny in here. Wait, let's wait for Danny. He's always good, up for a good time. He's usually naked. Wait, so we're still recording, right? Yeah. All right. Danny, let me see you. We're going to take a group shot. There he is. Woohoo. Okay. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay. That wasn't as.
All right. I'm going to share again.
Can't really hear it.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting, but yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, thank you guys for participating in that little random moment there. Okay. On to actual topic here. Everyone can see my screen, right? I did share again. Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, first of all, just to get our definitions in order. So a design system is a collection of reusable functional elements, which consist of components and patterns, which are all guided by clear standards that product teams use to create consistent experience across a range of products. Design system acts as a single source of truth for an entire organization by using a singular design language to guide the development of products. It's a very loaded sentence. If you're curious, this is Adobe's definition, so it's a pretty standard. There's a good reason to adopt this specific definition, but I did emphasize this parts that I thought were most important, so you can kind of see, single source of truth, components and patterns, consistent experience, reusable, standards, important things like that. So now that we kind of know what a design system is, this is kind of what I thought we could talk about today. So start with just basic concepts. We'll dig a little deeper into each of those main bullets. And with the design tokens, go real deep into those, and then talk about the value of having design system, whether it's with or without design tokens, and talk more about team makeup. So who you need on your team to fully support a design system. And so just some major tips on how to collaborate with between designers and developers while working on a design system, or just any, design or development team. Doesn't necessarily always apply to design systems. So that's kind of our table of contents. But so why would I want a design system? Let's find out. So for so yeah, I apologize. There's a lot of words on this slide, but I didn't want to break up these concepts because they all go together. Like they're really tight knit. They're kind of all needed all at once. But first and foremost, the design system really needs to be easy to implement. Or actually, let me start with the meta product first. So it's a product that is used by product teams. So it's not directly impacting the end user. So that's kind of just like a nuts and bolts. A design system isn't for the user, it's for the developers and designers who are building for a user. But first and foremost, the design system needs to be easy to implement, and the people using it every day need to see and feel the efficiency gain in following the processes that it implements. If it's too hard to use, it won't be used, and then you get random one-offs, and it's like the wild, wild west in code and design, and everything's all over the place. And that's kind of the opposite of what you want. So you want to make sure it's easy to use. And part of that is by documenting things, making sure that those guidelines and principles are cross-discipline, so that the designers and the developers are both referencing the exact same thing. It needs to be maintainable. If there's ever any additions or changes, you want to make sure that's easy to update so that the documentation matches the design and development components that are a part of the system. And then because it's being updated, you need to make sure it's versionable. And then governance and maintenance, because so many teams could potentially be using this one system. You want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of random additions and things are being used properly. So in that case, you need to have some kind of like audit process to make sure that teams are using things in the correct way. And random duplicates of almost the same thing. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, Alan and I agree with a point that Alan made. I'm going to agree with him. The meta product part of that could be beneficial to a user just because of the consistency of the UI controls and patterns that they're being presented with. Especially if you're in a very large product with many product, or a product company that has many large products within it, like Apple, being able to understand those patterns throughout the whole ecosystem helps with that. Although it does increase the production or decrease the production time and design around it, I think it increases the heuristics of a user's experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Did I say it right, Alan?
I'd open the chat after you mentioned that, but So I do agree with the fact that the it does provide a benefit to the users, but the system itself isn't used by the users.
Right, except for the end point of it. Right.
Yeah, and then Ren Tyler did mention that technically the developers are the design system users. That's true, but it's more than just the developers, and we'll see that later. So I'll just continue on here. Okay, so processes and patterns are kind of like two sides of the same coin. So how things are done and how they should look. Design system consists of a lot of people and parts that need to work together. So keeping the process consistent across organization improves efficiency because everyone knows what to expect and what's expected of them. Think of it as like guardrails or job description. It's just managing expectations and understanding what you're responsible for. And then the UI pattern library or design language, some people would refer to it as, that's based on a set of design decisions that make the UI controls look cohesive. So things like typography, color palette, how rounded the corners are, the thickness of borders, alignments, shadows, animation. You want them to all work together and make sense. So this is more of like a guide for designers, and they should establish rules that could be broken in the right circumstances to enable innovation, but should be kept to as close as a patterns as possible. I know Danny's a real stickler for this, but you shouldn't have rules to define how you design. You should have guidelines and principles to follow. Processes are a bit more strict, but the design and pattern guidelines are guidelines. So I don't want to confuse that too much. So, and I have talked a little bit about governance. That's also different than the pattern guidelines. So next we'll get into foundations. So this is what the design system is composed of, well, part of it. So brands, which includes color palettes, multiple themes. So we're talking like light theme, dark theme, high contrast mode, things like that. Typography choices, icon sets, layout and spacing rules, and animation and emotions. So you may have like little vibration motions on certain things for certain reasons, or like things swooping in from the bottom, or things that are consistent across your app for certain things to indicate like hover, and maybe it jiggles a little on hover instead of just turning a little darker. Things like that you want consistent and is foundational to the design, not necessarily specific component.
We had a question from Ken. Did you want to ask a question, or do you want me to read it?
Is the rationale there from rules are meant to be broken? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you talked about like guidelines and patterns, and I thought you mentioned rules too or something. But maybe I added that in, but like.
Yeah, I don't remember saying anything about rules, but
Okay.
Yeah. So process, like, so that here I'm trying to show that process and patterns are related, but they're not. Like processes were more definite, whereas patterns are more design decisions. And there's reasons that you make a design decision, whether it's based on branding, look and feel, or just aesthetics, spacing, alignments. There's reasons you make those choices, right? But you don't necessarily take into account every use case while you're defining those patterns at the start. So you may come across a time where you have to implement something or design an experience where the patterns you have don't work the way you want the experience to be end of day. So those patterns are not necessarily meant to be broken. They're meant to be guardrails, but if necessary, they can be broken for the right reasons. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that explains and kind of where my comment came from. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Yeah, so things like alignment or something, you may have a design system where you, sorry, did I interrupt someone? I have a question.
No, I wanted to add them, so just continue.
Okay, so I was just saying, if you have a design system that's built on like a left to right language, but then all of a sudden you start supporting a right to left language like Arabic or Hebrew, for example, your alignment will probably shift, and you're probably going to have to make some decisions on how to align things differently, or even just the way that eye tracking works for people that grow up in a right to left language. They go from the right to the, or top right to bottom left instead of left top, bottom right, like left to right readers usually do. So having those kind of placement rules doesn't make sense in that case, or even just certain types of content you may not have thought about, where a normal grid doesn't work. You need to do something else. So those kinds of breaking a rule for a reason.
Yeah, like I think like from a design system, it's like the reason why everybody started design systems. You know, we had style guides before this. The like, to Rachel's point, the style guide was very specific, whereas and very, very down to the pixel, right? Pixel perfect was the thing you heard, things like that. Whereas a design system kind of started thinking more about the various ways that you can apply design theory to various different types of applications and screens, getting away from being pixel perfect to just saying that if you're in a different environment, let's say, to like before design system started, we didn't even know that there's going to be an Apple Watch, right? And so if you think about like these new technologies that are coming through, it's like these guidances to be able to deliver a unified experience across multiple technologies and screens and non-screens as well. So
All right. Yep. Thanks. Thank you, Danny. I'll continue on. Okay. So if someone has a question, just yell it out, because I'm not really looking at the chat. So just,
yeah, I can do that. I'll monitor the chats.
Okay, cool.
I'll interrupt you.
Okay, so I already went through foundations, so let's fly by that again. And then the next major thing that a design system contains is reusable components. So these are your what you would normally traditionally think of as a style guide or a component library on the design side of things. So it would enable rapid prototyping, because a button is a button no matter where you use it. A text input is a text input no matter where you use it. So instead of reinventing the wheel every time, you just use the one that you already have built. So just like a drag and drop kind of prototyping experience for those components that already exist. And then similarly, on the development side of things, these would be like pre-built code components. So developer can just take a code snippet, drop it into a page layout, and everything already looks how it has to. You might just have to change a few properties and add some data, but there shouldn't be a lot of pixel pushing happening. It shouldn't be little weird like nuances that the developer has to do to make it look like the design. They should be one-to-one in how they're designed. Any questions on that? Okay, cool. So it's like if you remember the definition at the beginning, single source of truth was the text I had the biggest. I strongly believe that this is the most important concept of a design system. So primarily it should be cross-disciplinary. So designers and developers should both be using the same resources. They should have processes documented, should have best practices written out and agreed upon by the whole team. And then we've got our foundations and components built for design and development that are one-to-one and match each other. Assets, we want to make sure that everyone has access to all the things that they'll need to design and develop an application with this design system, things like fonts, brand imagery, stock photos, things like that. There's a lot of other assets, but just for the sake of space on the slide. And then certain types of data. So this could include the design tokens if you're using them. We'll go over those later. But also any automation or integration tools you might have built into the code, or like color accessibility stuff that you're like links to websites that do the color accessibility for web pages, things like that. Anything that you use as a standard to check things would be included there. So this is kind of what I came up with, and I was trying to really explain the single source of truth concept to my team a couple months ago. This is a pretty new design or diagram. So 3 main points I've been talking about: design, development, and documentation. I'll make up a point in the triangle, and they all reference that single source of truth. So this looks a little different if you're not using design tokens. This diagram does assume you're using design tokens, so that's how you get from the green center out to every corner. You're using tools and build processes that push out those the data of the design system, the tokens, and any assets and conversions you have to do, pushing those out into the design and development spaces. And then documentation is kind of on its own, but it's also stored in the same place, in the same version. Because remember, we want it to be versionable. And then if you notice, there's referencing going up to the same documentation from the designers, and the developers are referencing the same documentation. Meanwhile, designers and developers are collaborating with each other. And that's another really important concept that we'll get to towards the end of the slideshow. So
yes, question. Hi, it's Alan. Where do you start with your source of truth? Where does it originate from for you guys, for Neudesic?
Yeah, so I'm currently using Adobe has a standard called a design system package. It's just a folder structure that we're putting into source control, and then that's where it lives. And it's versioned as a package, which we can pull into code.
So where does the definition of all the tokens and the other requirements that make up the visual part of the design system originate from?
All of that's stored in that same design system package. So even there's we're using Flutter on the project I'm on right now. So all of that Dart code for the Flutter components is stored in that design system package, that DSP folder structure.
All right, so I'm going to throw a scenario out at you. So let's say you have in your design system, you have a certain table control for React defined in there. It's got how the columns behave, filters, sorting, loading, page loading, lazy loading, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And now an engineer is working on a new project and it doesn't apply there to their finding, right? Maybe they're having a hard time implementing it in that given development environment. Mm-hmm. So according to this, they'll come back to you, right? And you guys will have some conversation. So if there needs to be a major change to support this new tool, what are the steps you guys take to make the change?
Yeah, so that's where the process definitions come in. So you would, as a team, really work out how those work. There are a few standard processes I would recommend having right out the gate, is that one you just mentioned, is how do we support people who are using this? And then a couple other related ones are, how do we maintain if there's if we find bugs or we need to add on, what's the process we take for those? So while we're still kind of in our own infancy at the design system I'm working on, those are things that we're updating as we go, because we're learning a lot along the way. And honestly, we only have one team that's consuming this at the moment. So it's more of a conversational thing, and we don't have an external team coming to us. But those are definitely important processes and procedures you want to have aligned, so that that team would know how to approach you as approach the design system team on how to get the help that they need. So while I don't have a direct answer,
it's okay.
Question,
I can give you some of our experiences. So from I think Rachel's looking at her team, right? And so we have multiple clients, with different design systems, and their maturity is at different areas. So I promote, if it creates more value, then we should create a new component. Otherwise, if it doesn't create the value and there's already a component that exists that still delivers on that value, we should default to whatever existing component we have in the design system. So that's kind of how I've approached it.
So how do you measure that value, and at what point do you take it back to user research to help kind of get some qualitative, quantitative data on what you're going to do?
Yep, exactly. So if you think about a design system as something that you eventually, the quality keeps going higher as you've tested it, right? So you've got components that have a lot of user testing and a lot of validation, but that's the point of it's guidance over governance. And so if a team feels very strongly that this one different variation of a feature is actually going to improve their experience, then why hold them back? Let them go off and test it and validate it, and then we might adopt it into the design system. So that's how usually I've answered that, because as you have a lot of people using it, a lot of teams using it, you shouldn't get in the way. If they feel like it's more valuable if they used a different approach to that, then it should grow our design system. And we shouldn't prevent it from that team deciding that this is how we're going to do a list, or this is how we're going to do filtering. So, I mean, it's a case by case basis, but we shouldn't get in the way of innovation, and let the teams run through their process of the feature and validating it.
Yeah, good points, Danny. So I definitely agree with all of the weighing the value before you add it to the design system. But again, that's where the patterns, the design patterns that are established come into play, where you determine like, okay, well, this table, I think you said, was it some kind of table, doesn't work the way we need a table to work in our application. Let's, using the principles we already have, extend the functionality for it. And if that is something that has value to the design system as a whole that other teams may benefit from, yeah, let's add it to the design system.
So not everything needs to be added at this moment of the idea. There is a time when we go, do we add it or don't we? And if we upgrade to anything, that feature in all of the times that you've used it that isn't involved in the design system will then have to be worked.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is a topic you want to touch, but I find it fascinating that Danny's talking about innovation with respect to the design system, because in my experiences, innovation's happening before you even get to the point where you're talking about which components in the design system to use to solve the problem. So I'm curious how you've seen that experience play out. And I don't know, we can table that till later at the end.
It's definitely like always top of mind, right? But what we're looking for is like, what's going to make this experience unique, and focus on the unique, and the stuff that's just going to be repeatable, there's already patterns for it. It really looks at like, your common patterns that you always see, but it's really prioritizing those features up front and deciding like what's going to make my app or my solution stand out against other competitors, and really focusing in on those features to be custom, and to be fully customizable and tested, versus, hey, this is a profile, edit my photo feature. If that's not what your core thing is, then just use the design system. Why do we need to reinvent it? And so that's our approach, is when we come in and do the validation, the research and the discovery, and understanding like what's going to make your app really stand out, we focus the customization on the core features that are really gonna move the needle when it comes to the user.
Yeah, because I've seen some things at a company that we were working with, you know, that like you spawn the profiling pages and all the profiling features and all the things that we expect in those things. And then, you know, we were thinking about some other innovative ways to show the progression of my profile picture, because that's something they do in the real world. It's a weight loss type of scenario where my profile picture could be animated. You know, that's an innovation on profile pictures. I've never seen that having been done before, where I take a series of pictures and somebody can click on my profile and watch me literally lose weight. And so that's an innovation that I would put in there. Now, would I adopt that particular feature in an app that was for internal employee customer care, you know, or something? I don't know. I wouldn't do that, right? But it's a version of that of a profile picture. We can call it that, right? But it's an animated profile picture or something. And you know, does that go in the design system? We didn't, because it was a one-off innovation, right? However, if we start seeing that it needs it in all different things, we might add it, right? But in that case, we didn't. But it looked very similar. They used very similar atoms from their static one. It just had other things going on in the background. So had a play button.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this visual? Because it kind of leads into the next one. So I want to make sure we're all good on this before I continue. All right, silence is good. All right, so kind of remember the colors I used here because they're used in the other, the next diagram. So you just take that triangle and like kind of fold it in half. So the points are all in that one column on, you know, the design resources docs and dev resources. And then you got the single source of truth that was in the center on the left. I'm probably doing this opposite because your mirror image. Anyway, so think of this as the split between the design system team and the product teams, and kind of already touched on this a little bit with the last question. So you've got a whole group of people that are maintaining the design system proper, that are enforcing governance, making sure the docs are updated, making sure all the code snippets are tested, and making sure that the design and the code match, all those fun things. Building new components, all that. And then you've got your product teams who are actually using these things. So they're referencing your documentation, probably a website that shows all of your docs. They're using the design resources to design their product prototypes and for user testing and whatnot. And then the developers are implementing the code that's defined in the design system into their development products.
What do you use for your docs? What
we have a Flutter website. It's just for web. It deploys to web only. And we are using Markdown to format everything. And we have a few Dart widgets for code snippets and like images and things.
So if you make changes, it will actually show up there too.
Yeah, so everything's stored in,
so it's
in JSON, everything's stored in JSON in the single source of truth repo that we have. And every time there's an update there, it'll reflect on the documentation site. Man,
I've done that so manual in the past.
Yeah, so again, it's so stored in one spot. And if you wanted to look at an old version, you just pull up the old version and you can look at through history.
That's awesome.
Depending on which version of the design system you're using, because maybe you're close to release and they just came out with a new version you don't want to update because you don't want to break anything. So you're just playing it safe and you worry about the update after you release and make sure everything's fixed and you can do follow-up update. if everything's good.
So any kind of HTML website, it doesn't have to be a Flutter tool.
No, it's just we're really integrated into Flutter. We want to have everything in Flutter. Our team is very specific to Flutter, but it could be anything. It could be, you know, Angular site, a Vue.js site, React Native.
Something that needs to be built.
Native Android. Well,
Right.
yeah, whatever your support, it should be integrated and be able to use the data. And
Do you find
information.
yourself managing that, or does somebody else manage that as far as the details and writings around the component?
Okay, so that whole design system section on my team right now, that's like 90% me.
Okay.
So
So you have to be a good writer.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of technical writing documentation. I'm writing Dart code. I am playing around in Figma. I'm doing a lot of stuff. So.
We should get you more help. Why didn't you tell me this?
Yes, I've been asking.
I know.
So Rachel, the piece that makes it automatic, is that the design token?
Yeah, so for parts of it, yes. Other parts, not necessarily. I'll get into more detail when I get to the design tokens section.
Really quick,
if there's still questions, we can talk about it then.
How does like there's a couple of tools that I've seen people use, like Storybook. I think I got that right. Storybook.
Yeah, Storybook's one. Yeah.
And then from a documentation perspective, you know, there's the from, you know, the guy, the Frost, was it David Frost or something like that? They created a documentation.
Bob Frost.
Bob Frost, there you go.
Yeah, him. Yeah. So
I've seen it work really well. But yeah, that was another documentation, like, just to answer that, like, there's actually like a GitHub repo that you can just tap into, and it comes with all the documentation of like atomic, like an atomic design system. So
yeah.
But I've heard Storybook. So what's the difference between Storybook and what you've got laid out here?
Storybook only supports web.
Okay.
So if it's HTML, JavaScript, Storybook is great. If you're doing anything other than that, it doesn't support any other languages. I've looked into it. It's an awesome tool if you're doing web, but it doesn't support any other
responsive web on mobile too.
Yeah. So if you're doing any web
browser, all right.
Yeah, any web languages, HTML, JavaScript. But if you're doing something else like Flutter with Dart as your language, no good. Doesn't work with Storybook. Or if you're doing Maui or Xamarin Forms with C#, it won't work.
Yeah. And then the other piece is like, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but I think Alan, you would be interested in this. It's like, we're also talking about other pieces, other areas of the organization who are contributing at their level to that design system. So the research team, you know, they're validating and doing this well. Yeah. And then the brand, you talk about branding and marketing as well. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. I'll get into this. Don't get ahead of me.
All I see is product teams here.
Oh,
this is the first time I've seen these diagrams. You didn't show them to me
there's a
before,
whole slide on team makeup, Danny, and responsibilities. So we'll get there.
Let's go.
I'm just going over design system, and these are the people using the system. So
well, I'm saying that the branding team is also using the system, and user research is using the system.
Okay.
Moving on.
High level, I can't fit all that in one diagram.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
We have a UX person in this joint. Come on.
All right. So kind of to pick up where I left off on my diagram here. So eventually you have a product ready to release and you'll release it. So let's say we're doing an iOS app. There's also a team working on an Android app and a web app. As long as you're using design tokens, all of this should translate into whatever language you're using. And you'll still have those product consistencies throughout on design. It'll all look like the same, well, not necessarily same product, but the same business that built them. You would have things that look sort of the same. It'll look the same. Okay, any questions?
No.
Okay. All right, so the whole idea is that the single source of truth is one source. You can make multiple apps in different platforms, and they'll all be consistent at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, now let's get into design tokens. Super high level, what is a design token? It's a key value pair. You give a value a name, and it's a design token. So for example, primary button color, we'll call it this whatever hex value, I don't want to read it. Or body font size is 16 pixels. Those are could be considered design tokens. So it's not really a hard concept to get around. And we've been calling it a tokenized design system at my client. So that's just kind of what I use in my my slides here. So just get over it if you don't like the verbiage. But so it.
I thought I heard you say pickles instead of pixels. So I like that. I like calling them pickles.
I like pickles.
I like pickles.
If I go out and get tokenized design system right now, is that something that somebody's used before? Says something
I don't
made
know.
up.
I've searched, like Googled it, nothing's come up. I think it's just something.
Well, that's what you have to do.
I'm buying the domain right
name.
now.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Okay.
Do it.
But, yeah. So in a tokenized design system, the collection of design tokens is your single source of truth for design decisions. So while a single token represents one design decision, the collection of them should be your like overall brand cohesiveness. They should all work together. And these design tokens are consumed by both design and development. So like Figma can import these with the help of a plugin, and you can use them in your design. If they're modified, you can import the new ones and your design will update. If you're in development, you load in the new design tokens, run a script, and your property values change. So if you're updating color schemes, your colors will change. If you are changing the border radius of all input fields and buttons, it will change the border radius. You just have to run it. And then the design tokens are managed primarily by the design team in coordination with the development team. So there may be a time where you need to change how things are defined or naming conventions for some reason. You would need to have some development help with those, but for most maintenance parts, it would just be by design. And another thing that developers would need to be involved on implementing the tokens initially and making sure that all components that are developed later inherit those tokens. And yes, Danny, there is a demo in our future. I just want to get over the baseline. Everyone understands what we're talking about. So when we get there, you have better appreciation for it. You're not just watching something happen. Okay.
We have
and
3 hours for this. We're going to be doing. I'm just joking.
I get to what, 7:30 officially, right?
I need a bigger bottle.
8 o'clock.
I'm joking.
7:30. What are we, amateurs? 8 o'clock.
Okay. And so another important point with design tokens is they have to be stored in a way that's platform agnostic. Usually that's JSON. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions here?
Does anybody know what JSON is?
That's a friend of mine, an old friend of mine. Cool.
Jason. Can you explain JSON to people that don't know what that is, not including me?
JavaScript object notation is what it stands for. It's just a data structure that's used by pretty much any platform, or it can be read by pretty much any platform, whether it's JavaScript itself or Dart or Swift or Kotlin or Java or whatever. They all have a way to read JSON.
Okay, thank you.
What's Kotlin? No, I'm just joking. I was doing Sporky from
Sporky. Gosh,
Sporky.
Hey, Rachel, really quick, do you have a slide that talks about how to sell this to your company? Like how to tell your company, hey, you need a tokenized design system.
That's what the next 3 slides are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Danny's the guy in the movie theater that's saying, just kill the guy already. In a horror
I know,
movie.
right?
Yeah.
I know the ending. I'm leaving.
Okay. I'm gonna narrate through these photos because, or well, screen there. I took screenshots, but whatever. These diagrams, because my color text somehow got removed when I did my slide themes. So
your designer messed it
yeah,
up.
I wonder how that happened, Matt. So I mentioned earlier that a design token is just a key value pair. So here we've got a value of red, just F000000. So instead of saying that every time I want to refer to that specific shade of red, I give it a name. I call it red 500. And we use that specific shade of red, which we call red 500, in 2 use cases. So these are like semantic names. One of those is error, another one is danger. They both reference a key and not a value directly, so they're considered aliases.
Danger Row Watson.
Everyone with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. So now
I always thought that was an interesting semantic name. Danger. Like when
I think it's like you've got a button that's delete, like it can delete something that you can get back. So
well, the cool thing of this is like it depends on the framework. Some of it, might be there's fire or something else. They'll use their own
but
variables.
It has
so
a
that's
meaning.
Cool.
It has a meaning, right?
Yeah.
Or like your target and your main color is red 400.
Oh yeah.
Damn you.
Okay.
Companies I never want to design for. Sorry.
Or they're a red branded company and then everything's red. So they use like pink or orange for danger.
That's my current company. We have red everything.
Dude,
I know.
Tell them to stop.
We try.
Okay, next concept we're building off of that. So let's say we've got this input field that we have, a nice, beautiful design input field that has validation when you don't have input that's formatted properly. So we're using that error color as a border, and we're defining another alias that references the error color. We're calling it AirBorder. And then once all of our token, word finding issue. When our references are all resolved through the chain, we get in development, AirBorder equals our lovely hex value that I don't want to say. So at the end of the day, border of our validation.
Just say it. Come on.
Just say it. F double lot dot.
Okay. The references all resolved to the value, so you don't have to worry about any of that development, and you just get what you need for how it's supposed to look. Now, the real value of the semantic naming convention comes up here. We have a product designer that decides, oh no, we can't use the same color for error and danger. We don't want to make
our logo color.
Or that too. We don't want to, like, if someone enters some wrong text, we don't want to make them feel like they've done bad. We want to make it a little softer. So let's use orange for error and reserve danger only, or red only for danger. So now
we don't want to offend them. Sorry, it wasn't your fault, it was ours.
So now to change that in the entire design system, all you need to do is remap your error to, instead of pointing to red 500, make it point to orange 500, which is your new defined orange color that you wanted. And that's really how it is. Everything should update as it should in your border colors, and you shouldn't have to do much more than that. It'd be really simple to make the change. This is in contrast to the olden days where you'd have hex values hard-coded every time they're used. And that could take days, weeks, hours,
You just
months,
search and replace, right? Like that'll work, right?
But maybe have a slightly different value of red.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
How does this stack up to SAS?
Like, yeah.
No, that's what usually turns out is like you have a different hex for the same very similar color.
Yeah. You got two shades of orange that are only like one bit off of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly how it is in the project I'm working with.
I had to do that.
I counted 5 different greens that were like almost exactly the same.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And this this was in design files, not in development, which makes it even worse.
Yeah. So with your experience, you can kind of see how something like this would be super helpful, right?
Yeah, a color picker problem. Hey, how does this stack up to SAS? Because you can do that kind of stuff in SAS. Like, what would be the advantage of this?
So the thing with SAS is it doesn't translate direct, like with design tokens and SAS. So design tokens work very well with SAS. I've actually used it on a Vue website, and we were using Material Bootstrap. And so we just overrode the default variables in the Bootstrap variable files, and it worked great. Thing with design tokens, it also translates into your design files themselves. So there's like an added bonus to it. Okay. So you wouldn't get rid of SAS because you're using design tokens.
Right.
It would help you develop them. Yeah.
It translates it
from
the design file.
Rachel, would you say that it's using the same theory as what you would see with SAS? It's like using the same power of using shareable variables that they get compiled.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much anything you could do in SAS, you could do in design tokens.
Yeah.
It's just that the power of design tokens is it works with more than just web.
Yeah. Cool.
It's platform agnostic.
And controlled by the designer?
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
Ideally, you output the design token, give it to the developer, and it makes it all work.
Yep.
When do we get rid of you? When is that? No, I'm just joking.
I don't think that ever happens.
We don't need developers now.
Just joking.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go on. So this kind of goes more into the semantic naming, why you'd want to use semantic names. So this describes the use of the token, not the value. So remember I had those like red 500 token names. Those aren't the values you'd actually want to use in your UI. Those are just to help you manage your like colors or what something is for. But that's those are like halfway, what do you call it? It's a token that's meant to be aliased and not used directly. So even though, or in our example, the business wanted to originally have error and danger both be read, because everything was named semantically, you could update them independently and it wouldn't affect the other at all when you change one. And because the use-based semantic naming convention is intuitive, you don't have to have any extra documentation defining what token values are used for, because the name is the definition, right? So there's also that clarity of when to use and how to use built in. And also another thing with terms of like branding and theming, if you got a light theme and a dark theme and a high contrast theme, those tokens all need to be named similarly based on what they're used for, not the value that they are. So, primary button color works for both light and dark theme, even though in dark theme it might be light blue, and in primary, it might be a dark green, just depending on how you have your theme set up, right? So it could be completely different colors, but they still have the same use, just in a different theme. Any questions on that?
Controlled by the
Have
top
any
layer.
suggestions for, like, you may be getting into this later, but like using design tokens and aliases in something like Figma or XD?
I have a example of Figma and part of my demo, like semantic namings that goes into more than just a outline color. So hopefully that'll help you.
Okay.
And if you still have questions, then I'll answer them then too.
Rachel, are you saying that there are already an existing set of like agreed upon like naming conventions, or you're just saying use the approach? You're telling us the approach is to do it
more of an
based on
approach.
yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a Figma schema conference where Asana, I believe, Asana did a presentation on how they do their semantic naming convention, which is very well thought out. And I would recommend looking into that if that's if you're looking more into how to implement a semantic design token naming convention. They were able to implement a dark theme when they only had a light theme, after they were able to successfully implement their semantic naming convention.
Yep.
And they were all based off of, there were 4 points. One of them was severity, one of them was, gosh, I don't remember. I don't have I can't say them off the top of my head, but there were like 4 points of, it was like application, so where it's used, and these were just for colors, this wasn't for everything, just for colors they had these. So where it's used, what its meaning is, so it'd be like primary, and it's a border, the control, so an input, so like input, primary input border color or something like that. And then they also had another one for severity, so if it was like high importance, medium importance, low importance, so that's how they controlled their the darkness or prominence. That's what it's called, prominence. Prominence of the prominence of their whatever that control was, if there were multiple different prominences.
Like the visual hierarchy, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So if you would have like the difference between like a toast, it would be if there's a warning, if it's info, if it's, those types of things. So so there isn't I'll get into this later, but design tokens are pretty new. There really aren't any standards. There's some guidelines, practices that a lot of people follow, but there aren't really any standards yet. I'll get into that in a few slides. Sorry. So next major topic, how do you gauge the value of a design system? And when is including design tokens worth it? Design tokens benefits, it helps you keep brand consistency across all mediums. It enables white labeling capabilities if that's something that you need. It helps maintainability. So like I was showing, you can easily update or modify colors or other aspects of the design system, design decisions. Multiple themes, like I said, you can have light, dark, high contrast, night vision, a sparkle unicorn theme. It wouldn't be that much work to add a new theme. Cross-platform consistency, again, because design tokens can be applied to any design or any development platform or framework. It's consistent no matter where you're using it. You can automate it because it is platform agnostic. You can translate it however you need to, modify it however you need to, and do some fun automations with it. And then naming conventions and communications. because you're naming everything consistently, nothing's lost in translation. Your developers and designers can speak the same language and understand each other, know exactly what the other's talking about, because it's between design and development, all the names of tokens are all the same. Any questions?
What about some use cases? Like where does all of those? I mean, those are bullet points, right?
Okay, yeah. So
What are some
brand,
use cases?
yeah, so brand consistency, think of the company that has, let's say Netflix, right? Okay, Netflix has a ton of different apps that you can use. You can, everything from a mobile app, a website, TV apps for different platforms. You've got Apple TV, you've got Roku, you've got the Samsung Smart TV, all built on different platforms. But you can still tell it's Netflix, right? Everything's consistent. So having multiple form factors or platforms that you're building for, you can easily, like, you can see the benefit of always referencing the same design token to build your UIs. White labeling, this is so if you have an app where you're providing a service, like software as a service, but the consumers of your app have the ability to brand it themselves. So things like Shopify come to mind, where you take the Shopify platform, but you customize it to match your own brand as your own store. That is much easier to do if you have tokens that you just update the tokens to modify the branding and look and feel. Maintainability, this again, if you have a branding change, you have color updates, you need to change look and feel, or if you have a merging of two companies and you have to update brand on one of them, the having design tokens already implemented would fast track that, the making those two consistent. Multi-theming kind of speaks for itself. Light and dark themes very common, but there are other, for accessibility reasons. You may need high contrast. If you're doing something where you need to preserve night vision for safety, you can do that. And I just threw in sparkly unicorn because why not? Cross-platform consistency, again, this kind of ties into the same like Netflix analogy I was giving earlier. You've got all these different platforms, but they all look consistent. Completely different languages, different form factors, but you can still tell it's the same brand. Automation, that's just for development, speeding up development, doing really cool things really fast that you don't have to think about. You just set once and go. And then naming conventions, communication. I think I already covered that.
Yeah. So it saves money. It makes it faster for you to deliver to your users or to your customer. It allows you to pivot and change things that, and even from like a brand officer, like somebody that's in charge of a brand or customer experience, like they love the idea that they could theme their presence based on what's happening in the real world, right? So some ideas around that. But yeah, some good stuff here. But yeah, it saves money and it gets you to value quickly and faster than if you didn't have a design system.
Yeah.
So Rachel, sorry, I know you're gonna get into challenges next, which is cool.
Yeah.
But my one question is, do you get into the cost to implement? So if you have an existing platform that's, got a couple of years of code in it.
I don't have a cost. I have, I guess it would be information that could inform a cost.
We could have one of our sales reps contact you.
Oh, if you just like what it would take and how that could impact. Yeah, I do talk about that later. So yeah, that's in what I think that's the next slide, actually.
we used to use you guys, Danny, but then
Yeah, what
Like-
happened? Then you took over.
no, I
Yeah.
think well, they did hire me, but leadership didn't want to pay for engineering anymore.
Oh man,
They hired a bunch of people and then they moved them offshore.
nice.
Sorry, this is really tiny
They
text.
took them here and then they moved them offshore. I'm just joking.
We'll talk about that over. Yeah.
Sounds good.
You were exiled to
You're,
a
you're
different
gonna need
country.
at least five more bottles of wine or whatever you got there. I don't even know.
Actually, I need another
Whiskey.
beer.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind
Why
of
is
already.
this font so small?
Oh my gosh, Matt, it's your fault.
Did you guys do a design system for the PowerPoint presentation?
I had boring slides, and Matt's like, "No, those need to be cooler looking." So he took my slide deck and updated them all. And
I guess I
apparently
missed
some
that
of my
bit.
slides got really messed up. So thank Matt for not being able to read the slide.
Keeping you on your toes.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I can't even read it. I have to look at the big screen. So I already kind of mentioned that the standards aren't really there yet. The B3C, that like the web standards group, they have a working group, but there's no plan for it to ever become a data format or a standard data format for design tokens, that is. So there's a group of people that are interested in making a standard, but it's not even close to being actually standard. There's several major players that are using design tokens, and so Adobe and Amazon are probably the biggest ones in the design token space. Adobe I already mentioned with their design system package framework, and Amazon is the author of I think the coolest token translation tool there is, called Style Dictionary. And it's open source. It's really cool. It's actually what I'll be demoing later. And best practices, there really aren't any best practices at this point. Tokens are so new, people are really playing around with it, kind of finding the thing that works best for them, and there isn't really a industry standard on how to do things. With a tokenized design system, it kind of necessitates having someone that has both UX design and UI development skills. It's not required, but it's definitely helpful. It's necessary to have either one person with those skills or design and development that work really closely together in order to make those one-to-one components, so your design and your development components match. And then a dedicated full-time team to build and maintain a tokenized design system. So this kind of gets into your, like, what would it take? And I'll get to team makeup in next section. So you may not be able to maintain or financially be able to have a full team to maintain this if it's a smaller company. And even if you've got only a single product, you probably don't need a tokenized design system because you got your development and your designers working closely already. You don't need to have that design system as a middleman, and design tokens would be like overkill in that scenario. All right, cost and benefits. So you would have to spend more time doing these things in order to save time from doing some other things. Things you'd have to do more of or spend more time doing, you'd have to build and maintain the design system, first of all. You'd have to support the users of the design system, so product teams, so developers, designers for products. And you have to implement and maintain all the documentation and processes to manage all these new interactions of the system. But by doing so, you'd save a lot of time prototyping and UX, developing the UI. QA would be simplified because your UI is already pretty much good, and accessibility and usability should already be baked into your components. Maintenance should be streamlined for UI if like bugs and things like that. And user support you wouldn't have to field as many usability support calls because the consistency helps intuitiveness for users. So ideally, you'd save a lot of time doing a lot of things that are usually time consuming for product teams. And realize that you've only got one team doing more and all of your product teams doing less. So it scales the more products that are implementing the design system. Did that answer the question about the cost of, or did that help?
No, because looking at it from my scenario, right? I have an app and a website and a couple different websites, which are different to different populations of users, both internal and external.
Okay.
And the cost would be to go in and rewrite and implement it the right way, right? And we still need to create the design token. So when I go to leadership, I'm like, hey, look, here's the cost benefit of doing this. So what's the cost to get us to the baseline? And then, now the sites and apps are converted. And then now it's the maintenance cost.
That's actually the slide I forgot to add. So the retrofitting versus starting from scratch.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, in your case, we were talking about retrofitting an existing retrofitting an existing product. Yeah, you would want to start with some low-hanging fruit. You would start with things like buttons, input fields, typography styles, things that are used on almost every layout. And then from there, you would, once those components are defined and settled, that's where you would go in and systematically replace those things in your product using the tokens. There'd also the tokens into the project.
Are you doing a complete redesign of everything? So it's not like you're having to support an existing, like, are you using all new frameworks? Are you just doing an enhancement?
Some of the apps are using different frameworks.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're looking to upgrade. You're not looking to redesign or
no,
replatform.
It's not redesign or replatform. It's just institute.
Yeah.
The new design ops process.
Like I would say you want to evaluate if you are using, like, your frameworks are using these patterns at scale. So Rachel talked about material. Are you using Bootstrap, but are you doing Bootstrap the right way, or are you guys just basically just editing directly into the Bootstrap files, things like that?
It's totally cowboy.
Yeah, so that's where the cost goes up.
Or cowgirl.
And yeah. So what we've done, like, because we had to do the same thing with one of our clients. They went through a whole rebrand, and there were 7 or 8, 9 channels that we had to change, just basically logos and colors. And like, if it's cowboy, we did an analysis of the entire site to then estimate how long would it take for us to change, not just change the color, but also consolidate and create the ability for you to then update, right? So go in there, consolidate it, and fix it. That would be my recommendation. And then exactly what Rachel said was, start with the low-hanging fruit, and then grow out of there.
I'm trying to start with a table,
Yeah,
we have a table almost in every one of our reviews because it's an enterprise product.
Boom.
Like, can we please standardize this thing?
Yeah.
And then get column chooser, sorting, filtering, search.
We actually have some case studies where we did it wasn't a re-platform, it was an enhancement, and we actually sped up the delivery. Like, originally they were estimating like 12 months to deliver. We delivered it in like about 3 months.
Nice.
But it was all with reusable components. So instead of finding those repetitive, exactly what you found, that table, make it a reusable component that's distributed across the your applications, and then just go little by little, right? You're just building that. It's almost like I'm going to steal a word from one of our guys. It's almost like an evolutionary design system, right? It continues to evolve as you find consistency and kill some of that, repetitiveness and duplication.
Yeah.
It's the conversation that I need to have is more strategic and persuasive than, technical.
Yeah.
We should we can share some of our notes.
Hey, look, stop searing your steak first and then cooking it. Try the reverse sear.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
What? Never.
Yeah. That's a difficult thing to get buy-in a lot of times.
I think I've used up all my currency, so.
Well, you can save time and money on this one. So yeah.
Yeah. And then
I'm happy to share some of our notes.
Yeah. Okay. Just for the sake of time, I love the conversation, by the way. So
I thought we had 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on.
We can if you want, I suppose. But so this kind of just builds on the cost benefits. So we want to enable the product teams to do more valuable work by providing them tools that they need to do the work that they have to do. So they can spend time and effort on the problems and building the solutions that really matter to the end users. So for UX, this means less time debating specifics over UI elements that are probably just rebuilt, like reinventing the wheel or the button. And so they can spend more time doing research, prototype user testing, making sure what they're building is actually useful. Developers, this could mean less time coding each page individually from scratch. They can spend more time making sure that the logic and backend is sound, and also writing unit tests, their favorite. For QA and just overall quality, less time testing for and logging bugs, reviewing UI fixes that came up in design reviews. So that there's more time to ensure unit test code coverage and that performance is up to par. Less of the tedious mind work. Start on team makeup. Just what kind of people, what skills do we need? So design system and product team, I broke it out into two. They're very similar. So in a design system without design tokens, this would be your average team makeup. If you've got a large design system that you're managing, you'd need at least someone to guide the vision, and usually they're a subject matter expert on the brand, or they may be closely linked with their marketing department. You have project manager to manage work and making sure things are done. Visual designer who also has a specialty with accessibility to make sure everything is built in a way that everyone can use it. UI or front-end developer who can build the code parts of the components. Technical writer for documentation, and QA and usability testing to make sure everything is functioning as intended. So this is for the design system. On each individual product team, you would need, it's very similar makeup, product owner, again, driving the vision of the product, manager to manage the work, UX researcher, that's not included in the design system team, but this would be a person that's making sure that the product is fulfilling the user needs. Product designer, so that's in conjunction with the researcher, making sure that the UI is intuitive and follows all the necessary design system guidelines. Developers, depends on the product, but you need at least a front-end developer, probably back-end developer, maybe a data analytics person, usually a technical architect, and someone with the DevOps experience to get the app out into the user's hands. And again, QA and usability testing, but this time for the experience and business needs being met instead of just component functionality. Any questions here? All right. Next slide, very similar. I did highlight the differences. So a team that's using design tokens, you would probably add at least 2 more roles on the team, potentially more depending on how fast you want to build and scale a design system. So it's the same as before, we just add in design technologist as that like unicorn person that knows both design and code. And then your technical architect or DevOps person on the design team itself. You may have like duplicates of some of these people. You may have multiple visual designers. You may have someone dedicated to support. So someone, a developer dedicated to support and a designer dedicated to support, depending on how many teams are using your design system. So those are other things that may scale with the number of product teams you're supporting, but otherwise there's not that much of a difference, but there is a huge skill learning curve if you are getting into design tokens.
But you said you can do it all.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have been. I don't want to be. Yeah, so I collect unicorns.
Yeah. There you go. But I think, like Rachel, I think like whether, you know, this would be a mature team, right? So like for the people on the call, just start practicing it.
Yeah, so this would be like a super ideal team. Like this probably won't happen first right out of the gate. This is a, you know, it's been around a few years. We've ironed out most of the kinks. We're not really building a whole lot of new stuff. We're mostly maintaining and upgrading old stuff kind of team.
They make $12 an hour.
Like you're still like, here's the thing is like if you're starting on a new app or you're going to go design something that's brand new, take a design system approach to it because you're more than likely going to use it again. So every time we create one thing, if I see myself duplicating that in another screen, guess what that happens? It's part of my small design system.
Yeah. So I would say think of these more as roles. You might have one person performing 4 of these roles at the start of a design system. You might have one person that does it all. Like I'm probably doing like 5 of these.
That's how we started practicing design systems here at Neudesic, because just like some of us saw that it was going to make us be faster, more efficient. And we didn't even sell a design system to a customer. It's like, no, we're going to do this because it makes me faster and easier. It's easier for me to deliver on these very intricate experiences that we're delivering for.
Yeah. So these would be like the roles of people. These are the responsibilities. So the design system team primarily focuses on building, maintaining the documentation site, creating the design assets for the patterns and components for product design. So this would be like your Figma file that exports into a library that your product teams are using. Creating reusable components for development. So you've got developers actually building out code to create code snippets for the product teams to implement. Providing support for the product teams who need it. That might be in the form of office hours. So like every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 11, you have open office hours where anyone can approach you with questions and you'll be there to answer them. And then governance. So this is again like deciding when a new component should be added to the design system, or if it's like a one-off that really is only used in one product and isn't necessary to add to the global system for every product team out there. Product teams is probably more what you're familiar with. But in terms of design system, they'll be using the system components. So making sure that they're aware of what's out in the design system, following those standards and practices, providing feedback on components. So this is another thing where if you've got a component that almost does what you need it to do, you could reach out to the design system team and see if they're willing to add functionality to it or incorporate functionality that you add to it into the design system, so things like that. And also reaching out to the design system team to make sure that they're reviewing the code and everything is consistent across the products. Okay, before I get to the next section, any questions on the team stuff? I think we already had a few discussions. Okay, I'm going. So now community topic, and then hopefully there's time for my little demo. So some major tips for discussing design and development across the team. So in general, it's like just everyone should probably take some of these into consideration on a development team. So just have an open communication policy. No questions are dumb. Help each other learn. I think that's pretty just basic, right? If you think something might not be accurate, ask. That's another thing I've run into. A developer is just handed something and they implement it without thinking, and it's not exact, and they like hack it to make it work, things like that. If something doesn't look right, just ask. Set meetings with the whole team. This could just be like an agile type story, refinement or grooming session, but making sure that everyone's on the same page with what you're trying to do. And meet on a level playing field, right? We've all got the same goal. We want to build an effective product. So you may lose an argument, but doesn't mean it's not a win for the end user. So don't let your ego get in the way of making the best product. And then specific tips for designers. Browse the tech implementation guides. Don't just stick to the design section of your design system. Like, make sure you're also somewhat aware of what the technologists are working with. Again, talk early about tech feasibility and in your products. If you're designing something with data, pretty much anything these days is with data. Sometimes the data structure really can't change, so you'll have to kind of bend to the will of the data. Unfortunately, not ideal, but again, have that discussion early so you don't have to redesign stuff. Try to understand the underlying system logic. It's related to the data structure thing. Make sure you understand how the process works under the hood and like the order that things happen. If there's any prerequisites to getting certain types of data, just understand the way that the process has to flow logically with the technological systems you're working in. And this is just something I tell all designers, don't be afraid of looking at UI code. Although it's not necessary to design a great user experience, knowing the ultimate medium your design will be in will make you a better designer. Just if you are building a website, having a basic understanding of HTML and CSS. If you're building a mobile app, look at some Swift UI code, look at some Kotlin Compose files. Like, just try and see how everything's translated when it gets to the metal of the technology. It'll help you out. Again, not essential, but it'll be very helpful. And now from the developer side, I suggest that developers familiarize themselves with the design system guide. Make sure you understand the terminology designers use to describe their work. I also advocate for learning, especially typography, layout, and spacing guidelines, because those are the things a designer might not spend as much attention on when they're building a layout. They might use a slightly different form of typography. It's not a heading 1, it's a heading 2, but on every other page it's a heading 1, so things like that. And understanding the intent of a design will help you make judgment calls. So again, just make sure you're aware of the design if you're a developer. And again, don't hack it. Don't just take a design you're given. Don't force a component to do something that a prototype is doing. If you have to force something, it's probably not the intent. So that have that conversation, come to a compromise with your designer. And yeah, we already kind of talked about this, but if there is a new component that deserves a feature out of the design system, that may be the case. Otherwise, there may be another component that does the same or the similar thing that you need that you can use instead. So just being aware of what's out there. And last slide. We are 11 minutes over and I still haven't got to my demo. But any questions? And then anyone that wants to stay along for the demo is welcome to do so.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay.
You don't have anything else to do, do you?
Demo.
Actually, I'm gonna run and get some water. I'm thirsty. Want to do
Break.
a 2-minute break?
2-minute break.
Cool.
Drink them if you got them. Does anybody smoke anymore? I don't know.
Cigars occasionally.
Is that smoking though? That's like sophisticated smoking.
I think everyone vapes now.
Yeah. Which it's safer. It's pure chemical. We've eliminated anything natural that would go into your body. Now it's just unnatural things.
Synthetics are cool.
It must be better.
Ooh, someone's getting pretzels.
Oh,
Colleen. Jealous. Pretzels are good.
that's a break. That's a break.
Okay. So when I did my quick dry run through, I was at around 30 minutes. So thank you
30
to all the
minutes.
interruptions and side content.
I was
gotta
trying
go
to
the
stretch it out.
restroom.
Well, I knew I had enough content. That wasn't the problem. It was just I don't think I got my demo to the point that I wanted it to be at.
That's okay. Just show us some stuff, and then we'll move on.
So I'll concentrate on the Figma stuff because I think that's the coolest stuff that this audience will enjoy. So I just took Atlassian has their design system publicly available in the Figma, whatever, it's their Figma community version, whatever they call it. So that's what I used as my basis here, so I didn't have to like reinvent the whole design system to show you guys. So I'm using a plugin called Figma Tokens. Really cool plugin. There's actually a like Slack community out there with the developer who's actively developing and adding new features. Like there's new features like every other week. It keeps getting better and better. More features, whole bunch of cool stuff in this little thing. What I did to get where I am in this file anyway, I got my Figma Tokens plugin. I hit my, there's a load button here, which will take all of your Figma styles that it can parse. It can't parse everything. It's mostly just colors and typography you get for free. That'll load those into your token viewer here. I added a bunch of stuff, so you wouldn't get quite so much stuff, but yeah, so you see all these are empty. It's because it didn't autofill those and I didn't make any. So why is it not scrolling?
This plugin's basically just a JSON reader, right?
Yeah, so there is a, oh wait, no, they recently changed the layout of this, so I'm sorry. you have to export. Yeah, here you get to see the JSON.
There you go.
Yeah, so this is the JSON, the raw value that it stores under the hood. And this is also what is exported so that developers can consume it. There used to be like a JSON tab up here, so I was confused. Yeah, so that these are, let's concentrate mostly on colors, because I think that's the most intuitive place to start when talking about tokens. So we've got our just basic color palette here. So you've got blue 500, 400, 300. We got our 100, 75, and 50. That's just the Atlassian naming conventions. They've got blue, red, yellow, green, teal, purple, natural and light, and then natural light, or neutral, sorry, neutral light and neutral light alpha. So these are black with transparent values on them, where these are opaque shades of gray. It's the only difference between those. And then this is where I started making stuff. So this primary error, this typography section, this control, I have input, I have a button, and then down here, these are other text values that somehow got orphaned at the bottom, but they should be up here with typography. Yeah. So how these work, these are all aliases. So this primary base is what it's called. References. First of all, is this like super small for you guys? Can you read what you're seeing? You can see it?
Yeah,
It seems fine to me.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure because I have a pretty big screen here. Okay, so yeah, so this references our blue 300 value, and you can see there the hex value that it resolves to. And then you've got primary active, references blue 500, primary disabled, references blue 50, primary hover, blue 400, et cetera, et cetera. We got our different values. We got our primary text, primary background, primary border. So different use cases of our primary meaning. So like a brand, technically primary brand color. And then we've got error values here too. So just text on a white background would be red 500. Base error color. This is just referenced by other things that use the error token. Error background references red 75. And our error border references red 500. So these error values and these primary values shouldn't be used directly. They should be applied to a specific use case. So things like typography, we've got a link here. Our link is referencing a primary base. Link active is referencing primary active. See how this is making sense? Link visited is referencing purple. We haven't used purple yet, but it's just whatever. I just threw that in there. It probably should be another semantic. And primary hover, and then or link hover is using primary hover. So if we decided we wanted to change these link values, instead of being a primary color, if we had a secondary color defined, you just have to change these 4 values. All of your tokens should still be related to link base, link active, link visited, and link hover, so that those all translate properly. And then we've got our base typography. So it's just like text would be normal reading text. A muted one if you've got certain headings that are lighter shade. Error text against a white background. And then text that appears against a primary background. On primary, I use the material naming convention here. And actually, these are like the same on primary type of definitions. So, sorry, scrolling the wrong way. Okay, so that's kind of how this naming convention works. You can see that these are all consistent through the different controls. So our input border uses the primary, and then for the error state, it uses the error. For the background, we've got primary background and error background. Text for entered value and for placeholder. Yeah, so like it's all named based on the use, and it's referencing a another semantic use, like color group, but not the color directly. Any questions on how this is set up? Is this all making sense? All right, so this can also be applied to spacing, padding. You can have base values and just use a multiplier. I didn't spend the time to do that here, but it's something that can definitely be useful. Similar to how SAS does, you can do math with SAS, if you're familiar with that. And then another cool thing is a typography. There's these headings, which if you look at here, so these match these typography values here. So it's got all the same settings. So H900 uses all of these, all of these tokens, so that once they're exported, they're all grouped in a way that it's named for like H900, but H900 font family, H900 font weight, H900 font size, so that you know that those they're linked to properly, because most development for typography, at least, they have individual properties for each of the values, so they need to be separate tokens, even though it's a single style in design. So any questions here? I'm going to click over to some a web project to kind of show you how this would be implemented into actual code. So I would export this. Do you have a question?
No, I was just saying, nope. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
See it.
So I would export this. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again, but I would export this JSON structure. So this is what JSON looks like for those who were wondering. It's, R500 has the value of this hex. It is a color, and it is named red dirt apparently. Yeah. So then I'll go to code. I'll make this a little bigger.
Very semantic.
Yes. Yeah.
I like the dragon's blood one.
Yeah, Atlassian has some fun names. I think there's one called Harry Fairy. It's like really, like, where did they come up with these? But I love it. Okay, let me kind of walk through how tokens would be added to a project here. So this is just a like basic starter bootstrap project. It really doesn't have much in it right now. But you can see there's a tokens folder with my base JSON. This is the export, what I just exported from Figma tokens plugin. So this is the same as we saw before just now. And we've also got Bootstrap loaded in here in the node modules. I won't open up. That's a crazy huge folder. And then here, this would be our HTML partials. It's using a framework, so it's easier to build componentized. This is a SAS folder. So this is where the wrong one. UX variables, not the UX. I already got the same thing over here. Anyway, this is after it's translated from that JSON, this base file, after it gets translated by the style dictionary tool, you'll get this list of just token values. So you've got your key and your value for everything we had in the JSON file. So you can see our color palettes, just basic color palettes all the way through. Our text, we've got font sizes. Oh, there's an error right here. That's not how it should be. Everything else looks good. We've got our font names. We've got font sizes. And then down here, we've got our colors, our semantic color names that I created. We've got our link base color, our link active, link visited, link hover, et cetera, et cetera. So if I were using Bootstrap, those of you who are familiar with Bootstrap know that there's this variables file that just has all of the variables you can adjust to change the look and feel of the default Bootstrap components. So I didn't actually get around to changing all of these yet, but so you have, we've got a button, where's the colors? Button link, so these here are our links, link button, so we would replace these with our link values we decided. Actually, there's a disabled, so I might have to do another color in my design system if I wanted to do something other than the default Bootstrap gray. We can define our font weights for buttons, a shadow for our button. Again, those are things we didn't define, but they're available to change if we wanted to. So yeah, we just plug in these values that we define over here. So primary, primary input border. So I believe there's, just copy this to clipboard, primary. Yeah, input border. So there's an input section here. Input border width. I guess the color is a part of this. Button hover shading. I guess because you can make different colors. Sorry, again, I didn't quite finish this part, but again, if you kind of get the idea, you would change. We got a here input background color. You could change that to our token value here. Could change our disabled input background color here. Just replace those values here, and then you just use the Bootstrap framework like normal, and you should be able to build out your designs, or build the, have the designs you built in Figma match the design of the Bootstrap components. Again, I just use what was already available to me. You could not use Bootstrap and do it's completely custom, but I would still recommend using something like SAS, like this for web. Yeah. Unfortunately.
So do you copy that string that you just highlighted into that area, into the value?
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
Here, 1 second. Let me put this down again. So one, let's we've got. Let's find one. Here, text muted. So this value, we had a, where did it go?
There it is, right there.
Text muted,
Yep.
typography muted. So this color, I just have to copy that and paste that in there. And get rid of the default when you're using SAS, because that it shows that it will override any value that's marked default in a different file. So this is a copy of the original variables file that you would process in a specific order, so that these values override the default values in that other file.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if it says default, it's going to go to the other file.
Well, if it says default, it may not override. Like if you just replace this and you don't delete the default, there's no guarantee that it will overwrite the default value. You have to delete the default in order to ensure that this one that's not marked default will take precedence.
Okay.
That's just a
cool.
SAS.
And you just, that's the part that's a little bit of a pain, right? Going through that.
Yeah, doing the initial
replacing it.
setup is, yeah, it's time consuming, but once it's done, right? You don't have to redo it. Only time you'd have to redo it is if you had naming convention changes or something like that, where it doesn't line up anymore.
Yeah.
Any questions here? 'Cause I can, here, I'll scare you guys. I'll delete this file. Show you something cool. There it is again. I just reran it because my base file is still here. So that's how long it takes to build a new token set, like a second or less.
That's cool.
And that's all controlled by the tool I mentioned earlier called Style Dictionary. That's built by Amazon. And this is how it knows how to convert everything. I have a few custom things in here, like a font weight converter that's like seems really long, but it just takes the name of the weight and converts it to the 100 value for SAS. I convert pixels to rems. I'm removing, oh, that's just a function, the helper function. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we could have a whole other thing on a workshop on this.
Yeah, this is super cool. It's all in JavaScript, which isn't that hard of a language to learn. So if you're interested in just jumping in and you've never done any coding before, this is something you could probably understand fairly quickly. But yeah, this is like it's just logic. It's how, let's do a slightly more simple one. So here, font weight to changing it to a value instead of a named weight. That's the one I mentioned with I've got that little helper function up there. So it changes the value. So that's what its type is. It's changing a value. You can also have a name transformer that changes the name of a token rather than the value. Transitive, that just means it doesn't happen till the end of the conversion process. Matcher, so this is how you decide if something's converted or not. So it's got to return true or false. So if the token is type font weight, then it will perform this translate action, which is that function I showed you earlier with the font weights. So it'll take a string, a word, and convert it to a number based on the rules I had set up there. And it'll return that instead of, so if you look at, oh, wrong one, this one. We've got, right here, here's one. Paragraph default font weight. So if I were to look in my JSON file, okay, 106 I thought we would do it in that. What's the spacing? Where's my weight? Oh wait. Whatever. So it's got, let's see, here's a weight, just any weight. So it's referencing fonts weight. We'll just find one. So this, it's referencing other things. So that's what it's doing. Let's try it here. Semi-bold. So it's turning semi-bold into that number value. And it'll turn medium into a number value. So this is that platform agnostic format that we're using. And we just have to define how everything gets translated in this JSON or JavaScript file. Sorry. Yeah. That's really kind of all I have to show you guys. I was planning on making like a little UI with like a login page, and that just didn't happen. So
it's all right. I think it's an opportunity to have another, maybe just straight right into this workshop. Yeah. And kind of go and understand some of the intricacies of the code. But this is awesome. It's funny how much I've like retained some of this looking at. I haven't done it in years. Great. Well, thank you, Rachel. That's it. That's all I got. But it's a ton. I mean, I think I've learned a ton from it, and hope everybody has too. And this will be up on YouTube, so you can watch it later. And I'll make sure I push it out to all the channels.